you behave like a disciplined person long enough, and eventually you begin believing that you are one. You don't always need to wait until you feel like the person you want to become. Sometimes you need to start acting like that person first. In a strange way, we are not always what we think we are. Sometimes we become what we think other people think we are. And I know that sounds strange, so let me explain. Imagine you walk into a room and for some reason you begin to position yourself as a comedian. You are making jokes, you are entertaining people, you are constantly showing that side of yourself. And people begin laughing. Then they start calling you the comedian. Someone introduces you. This is Princewill. He's a comedian. At first, you know they're just saying it, but after hearing it about 10 times, 20 times, even 100 times, something begins to happen. You start believing it too. And once you believe it, you begin behaving in ways that are consistent with it. You start looking for jokes, you start studying comedy, you become more comfortable entertaining people. You start thinking of yourself as someone who does this. And eventually, something that began as positioning becomes identity. That's the strange thing about human beings. Sometimes we become the person people expect us to be. We have been told for years, don't care what people think about you. And there is wisdom in that. You should not allow every opinion of people to control how you live. But here's what I find interesting. If people's opinion had absolutely no influence over us, we would not need to be told not to care about them. The reason that advice exists is because we know that people can influence us. Think about it. If everyone around you constantly tells you that you are lazy, eventually you may begin seeing yourself as a lazy person. If everyone around you tells you that you are unreliable, you may eventually begin behaving like someone who doesn't trust himself to keep his word. But the opposite can also be true. If people consistently experience you as a disciplined person, if they know you as someone who keeps his word, if they expect excellence from you, you begin to feel a certain pressure to remain consistent with that identity. And that is where it gets interesting. What if we stop thinking about escaping people's opinions and started thinking about intentionally shaping their opinions? People don't have access to everything that exists in your head. They don't know all the things you could become. They only see what you repeatedly show them. And from what they see, they create a picture of you. That picture then affects how they treat you. If you consistently present yourself as someone who reads, people will begin to see you as a reader. If you consistently show up early, people begin to see you as one who is punctual. If you consistently keep your word, people begin to see you as reliable. If you consistently create things, people will begin to see you as a creator. And once people have that perception about you, something fascinating happens. Their expectations of you begins to reinforce your own behavior. People expect the disciplined person to remain disciplined. They expect the writer to keep on writing. They expect the entrepreneur to think like an entrepreneur. They expect the person who always keeps his word to keep his word. And because you know that this is what they expect from you, you become more likely to behave accordingly. We usually imagine identity working from the inside out. I believe I'm a disciplined person, therefore, I behave like a disciplined person. But sometimes it works in the opposite direction. You behave like a disciplined person long enough, and eventually you begin believing that you are one. You don't always need to wait until you feel like the person you want to become. Sometimes you need to start acting like that person first. This is why positioning is so powerful. You want to become a writer? Start positioning yourself as someone who writes. You want to become a content creator? Start creating. You want to become disciplined? Start building a reputation, both with yourself and with others, as someone who does what he says he will do. You want to become more knowledgeable? Start becoming the person people want to come to when they need understanding. Because eventually something happens. Your action produces evidence. The evidence produces belief, and the belief strengthens the identity. It's a loop. Positioning, behavior, evidence, belief, and then identity. Now, I want to make something very clear. I'm not telling you to become a fraud. I'm not telling you to lie about your abilities. I'm not telling you to convince people that you are a doctor when you are not a doctor. That is not positioning, that is deception. There's a difference between pretending to be something you are not and beginning to live in alignment with something you are becoming. If you want to become disciplined, don't announce that you are the most disciplined person alive. Start keeping promises to yourself. If you want to become a writer, don't call yourself a best selling author. No, start writing. If you want to become a leader, don't demand that people call you a leader. Start taking responsibility. The point is not to create a false image. The point is to create an identity that your actions can eventually grow into. You don't have to lie about where you are, but you also don't have to remain trapped by where you currently are. Now, this is the part I find most fascinating. Sometimes you have to give people a version of yourself that is slightly ahead of your current identity. Now, this is not a lie, this is a direction. Because when people begin expecting something from you, their expectations can create a kind of accountability. If everyone knows you as a person who never misses a workout, skipping the gym becomes almost impossible. If your friends know you as a person who always keeps his word, breaking a promise becomes a lot more difficult. If people know you as someone who creates content or creates videos every week, disappearing for a long time becomes uncomfortable because you have attached a behavior to an identity. And human beings naturally want their actions to be consistent with who they believe they are. Perhaps the question you should be asking is not, how do I become this kind of person? Maybe you should be asking yourself a much better question. A question like, how do I position myself to become who I want to be? And then you start from there. Because sometimes the fastest way to become something is to start behaving like the person who is already in that thing. Not because pretending magically transforms you, but because repeated behavior eventually becomes evidence of identity. There's something almost funny about how human beings work. We spend so much time trying to convince ourselves that we can become different, when sometimes we simply need to start giving ourselves evidence that we already are becoming different. So, if you want to be disciplined, position yourself as someone who keeps his word. If you want to become a content creator, position yourself as someone who creates. If you want to become a person of integrity, start behaving like someone whose word means something to them, and let people see it. Let them experience it. Let them begin expecting it from you. Because eventually, the identity you repeatedly present to the world may become the identity you can no longer deny within yourself. Make people believe it long enough for your actions to make you believe it too.